I'm really happy to give you this update today on how Norwood's going, and also to give you hopefully some insight into how the company is progressing, prosecuting the economic opportunities in front of it, and targeting the opportunities that we think our technologies and platforms allow the company to go after. So I'll start with a quick sort of update on the business. Just give you a disclaimer first on this, which is a typical disclaimer. And then just to give you really a single page view of how the company is doing at the moment, I'll go through each of these points one by one. The COVID situation for us seems to now be stabilizing, which is great news. It has in the past caused us to have to rejig our operations working from home like many other companies, and also changed relationships vis-a-vis clients. That all thankfully seems to be coming back down to kind of normal now. And in terms of our current projects that we're working on with existing clients where we have contracts, they are all progressing really satisfactorily, and we're super happy about how they're all doing. In the meantime, the commercial team has been reaching out all around the world, talking to a number of telco operators, and as well we have some international pilots and domestic pilots here currently. And we're obviously seeking to advance those opportunities to the next stage. The bottom line is that we feel the situation is becoming more crystallized for us in a positive way. A lot of uncertainty reducing, and because of COVID, we removed guidance for looking forward. We think sometime in the coming quarter we're going to be in a situation where we can actually reinstate some of that guidance, which would be nice. And you can read into that that we're feeling reasonably optimistic about our future prospects. And now I wanted to, hopefully that obviously questions can come in after I finish the presentation, but generally the view internally is very good. We're very happy with where we are currently. We're seeing a reduction in uncertainty, and we're thinking coming into this next quarter we'll be able to communicate a bit further some of the aspects of how we see that situation improving, hopefully in a numerical way. So I wanted to focus now a little bit on the core business and just give you a little bit of an insight, trying to help the market understand a bit more what's the nature of the types of opportunities we're progressing with. Also give you a little bit of a refresh update on the more recent developments in our technology portfolio and why we've done those things. Firstly, I'd really like to sort of focus, I guess, on just the technology piece and what it is that we're trying to sell to telcos and customers around the world, which is what we describe as a class-leading visual voicemail platform. And the central idea here is that there's a lot of telco operators around the world with aging infrastructure, and we have a solution that basically for very cost-effective amounts of investment can actually massively improve the quality of services that those customers are getting currently. I'll talk more in detail about this as we go through the presentation. But it really delivers a transformational voicemail experience. It has just now, having invested a number of years into the development of the platform, an amazing range of features. We're getting very high customer satisfaction scores from users that are using it, both directly online through the App Store, and also those clients of ours that are telcos that are using this and selling it to their customers. It has all the features that a telco needs today to help engage with their customer base and also identify potential issues in their network from the likes of robocallers and spammers. And it's got, as you can see here, cross-platform support for both Android and iOS devices. Really runs the whole gamut. We take special care these days to make sure that both the apps for Android and iOS are absolutely feature complete and deliver exactly comparable user experiences, as you can kind of see on the slides going through here. One of the major issues that we're trying to help telcos with is the rise of I guess what a lot of people call robocallers, but you could also call it call spamming or fraudulent calls, fake calls from tax departments and things. the reason that this has risen so much is that it's become very cost effective for bad actors to start generating effectively robotic calls that don't have humans associated with them, where AI is doing the calling and also generating the speech and everything. It turns out because that's very low cost, they can generate an awful lot of these calls. I think the data here that I've got here for 2018 was 26 billion robocalls. Actually, last year was something like 45 billion. We're seeing evidence that this is starting to appear in other countries outside of the US as well, Canada, Mexico, Australia even, for calls, and also SMSs starting to pester people. So there seems to be an emerging need for operators to try and deal with this, and the regulators themselves are also asking them to. So they're starting to build in databases for bad call IDs that they then want the telcos to actually warn the customers against. These database IDs are using an international standard, which I referred to at the bottom of this slide, called STIR/SHAKEN, and it helps operators certify that a caller ID is a legitimate and trusted number. A lot of the robocallers just basically impersonate your number and pretend that they're someone else as a way for you to answer the call. And STIR/SHAKEN is a great way to stop that. The trouble with STIR/SHAKEN, and this is where we're helping, is that it relies on you having an up-to-date database of all the numbers that are being used for this. And one of the things that would be great is to have this database updated regularly with new numbers, new bad actors that are coming in, where people have used certain numbers to try and impersonate others, or just new random numbers that are being used. And so we thought it would be a great idea to put a measurement point in the network for the telco operator where they could actually help identify these robocallers. And this is going down really, really well when we're talking to customers. It's a capability we just released literally just a few weeks ago, but we've talked about for a little while now in what we call release 3.5 of World Voicemail. And it deals with the idea of scoring inbound voicemails, either using the user or AI on the apps to actually derive some kind of spam score metric. Now, this is nice, obviously, for the user. They can manage spam voicemails and start blocking callers and do that kind of thing. But more importantly, we also report these metrics back to the operator. And so it allows them to take immediate action. I'll show you the framework here that we're using for this, which is really using a combination of the end user and also the AI on the devices to generate a joint score for various inbound calls that have happened. And without compromising user privacy, all it's doing is reporting back its thinking on whether these numbers are likely to be spammers or robocallers or not. And you can see the telco STIR/SHAKEN database here basically gets updated through the network to account for these new numbers. And there are potentially other insights arising from that as well. So that's a major new feature that we've just released. We're getting great feedback from it. Had a call with a Canadian operator just last Tuesday, and they're literally putting a person internally onto the case to start studying this and see whether it can be a helpful aid to their efforts to combat this scourge that's happening to their networks. Another key area, and this is a very wordy slide, so I apologize, but you can read it later. But the bottom line is that you've got telcos, you've also got people that play in the cloud world, like us and others. And McKinsey's observed that if the telcos were more cloud agile and behaved more like cloud operators, really they could reduce a lot of their operating expenses. Turns out they could reduce them by a huge amount, 30 to 70%, if they were able to think more like native cloud style services like Facebook or Google or whatever. And you can sort of see that comment down the bottom. We earlier did a very interesting project with the incumbent in New Zealand to deliver a hosted platform very quickly in advance of another contract that we're working on with them. And really it was to prove that A, you could reduce the OPEX of managing that solution, and also you could accelerate your time to market. And it was a great kind of case study for us. COVID in the meantime sort of intervened and made it slightly more complicated to manage, but we ended up with, I think, really good experience and results from it. That platform uses a really important piece of technology that Norwood spent the last couple of years developing, which is the core orchestration system that sits in the cloud, or could be on premises as well. But it's the main server component to these apps that we like to talk about. But this really does all the serious business of making sure the service is available. It uses two key technologies that are called Kubernetes and Cassandra to achieve this. This platform, as you can see here, is actually, there aren't really any fundamental limits to how scalable you can make it. Extremely reliable. I won't bore you with the technical details, but it basically allows you to scale up to arbitrarily large subscriber-based numbers and delivering sensational reliability. So when the operators are looking at that insight from McKinsey about how do they move their operations from their carefully curated on-premises network to a hosted solution and hopefully generate some savings, one of the things that's going through their head is, well, my current network is really reliable. I've engineered it to be like that. How can you demonstrate that your service is going to be as reliable? And this particular slide and kind of 100 pages of supporting documentation behind it really provides a lot of comfort to operators that we've thought deeply about how do you migrate services out of the on-premises network onto the cloud and make them extremely reliable. So, just to give you a quick snapshot of some of the things that we've been working on recently, the robocalling we're very excited by, and also this cloud platform that delivers the kind of carrier-grade reliability that people are looking for, and scalability and management are two real strong vectors for us that we promote when we go and talk to operators today. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what does that look like on a global basis, kind of firstly focus on the macro level, like who might want to use this globally, where does it work economically, and secondly, what does that look like for an individual kind of telco. Put together a hypothetical just so you can kind of see what the economics look like. But firstly, just the big picture stuff. Voicemail, why would anyone use it? Well, it turns out that a lot of telco networks do have some form of voicemail, and that it's aging, that it's getting really old. And so what's happening to the telco is that they get a communication from their vendor saying our platform's gone end of life. A couple of operators, actually a lot of the operators we're talking to see this, where they might have been using a particular transcription provider for voice to text message, voicemails, kind of a voicemail if you think about it. And those operators or the vendors have actually decided to change focus and move off into something else like vehicle command and control systems, like Nuance have done recently. And others just, the platforms have gotten old and they've got new platforms they would like to sell the operators, and all of a sudden hit them with much higher support charges. And so when that happens, it's a real opportunity for Norwood to come in and start having an engaged discussion with the telco about, can we provide something that actually can replace their current platform, but actually also deliver new service functionality. And to that end, we have two core offers that we've constructed for telcos. I think we've discussed this previously at the AGM. One is obviously our headline premier sort of premium service, fully transcribed voicemail. Because we use third-party transcription providers that charge for this, obviously there's a kind of revenue component to it. It actually provides a good excuse for us to get the operator to think about engaging with us in a kind of SaaS business model where we get a recurring revenue. This is relatively new for operators, but we're sort of seeing operators that are already contracted with us accepting that kind of model, and that provides a really nice recurring revenue stream for Norwood. The second thing I'd like to focus on though is the core service, and this is where we end up not doing the transcription but still provide visual voicemail. And it turns out that this by itself is a very interesting market. that a lot of operators today haven't physically deployed even visual voicemail without transcription, and that's a big opportunity for us. I'm going to take you through a couple of slides just so you can kind of see the worldwide view of where our solution can play, and then where both the core service and the premium service might find application on a global basis. So firstly, just looking at the world, and if you think of our premium service, is there anywhere where it doesn't really work? Well, it turns out there are, I think, kind of a half dozen to a dozen countries around the world where we don't provide support for the native language of that country as a first speaker language option. But pretty much the rest of the world we do. And it turns out when you do the numbers, that's about 95% of all countries and territories. And so we have a really broad, the bottom line is we have a really broad reach potentially for world voicemail for the transcribed version. And we also have a pretty broad reach for the low-cost core version. I've got a couple of slides here that just try to provide a little bit more insight for you as investors into where Norwood could sell these things. So with this particular slide, you can see the countries that are largely colored in red, where a minority of the operators in that country or none of the operators support visual voicemail today. Some of the ones that are quite interesting to us are where they have 1 or 2 operators out of 4 or 5 that are providing visual voicemail, because then the ones that don't obviously feeling a little bit of the pain that their voicemail service is a bit inferior to the local competitions. So for these countries, when you see how many of them there are, it's a pretty big opportunity for us. And we think when we do the analysis of what we could sell the core voicemail service for, because we don't have any external hard costs outside of hosting, we can deliver this at a fantastically competitive price point. What we're doing with these operators is basically saying, for the price of your existing maintenance contract for that old legacy system you have, we'll give you a shiny new visual voicemail platform for the same price. And we can do that with excellent operating margins because we don't really have any fundamentally large external costs apart from just the hosting services. It turns out just on the economics of how you deliver this, that turns into a pretty good business for us. So we think core visual voicemail is as interesting, if not more interesting, than the transcribed version, just from the point of view of its massive applicability through the region here. And you can see all these countries that are in pink and red, showing where we might be able to get some traction going forward. On the premium transcribed version, it's a slightly more complicated matter. Because we're using external transcription providers, and we then have to sort of gross all of that up into an offer per month, which we have to share as revenue. Typically, these services would be sold into operators as maybe 10% of what their existing contract price is for the customers. So if you're on a $40 a month contract, maybe it's an extra $4 to get premium transcribed voicemail. We see those sorts of numbers bandied around when we actually look at countries that are selling premium transcribed voicemail, like in the US with Verizon. But not all countries can actually support that. And if you look at India, for example, the average mobile contract, the monthly fee is about $1.27 per month US. So there's been massive price competition there, and it really stops certain countries from being addressable for us. But the net of it is, if you sort of think Europe, North America, South America, Asia Pac region, there are plenty of areas, and Russia, plenty of areas where premium transcribed voicemail still kind of makes sense, and we're keen to go after operators in those areas. The other kind of criticism sometimes that gets leveled about voicemail is, well, all the over-the-top people like WhatsApp and others are eating the operator's lunch, and they're not worried so much about voice traffic anymore. Well, that turns out not to be true. And this graph is, I think, an interesting analysis of what's the voice traffic looking like inside different operator categories. And it turns out if you're a mobile operator, their voice is still growing. It's probably exploding for the WhatsApps and Skypes of the world, but the mobile operators are not seeing a reduction in their voice traffic. They're actually seeing an increase, and that means that the value-added services those operators run that are structured around voice still have a lot of relevance. It becomes still quite a strong piece of their overall revenue pie. And so when we go and talk to them, not in the macro level, but in the micro level, where we're going to talk to individual operators, this kind of dialogue about how they can make more money out of their voice services becomes a real thing, and it's really forms the core of how we go and actually pitch to customers. And so I've got just a couple of slides on to wrap up a little bit how we actually go and pitch to these telcos and what sort of economic drivers they might consider when they want to actually go and consider purchasing a platform from Norwood. The starting pitch for us is always that their voicemail platforms are old, as I've noted earlier, and there've been a bunch of new technologies that have come out that really allow the operator to change the whole user experience dynamic for something like voicemail. And a lot of the operators we see are really quite hungry for new services, specifically, I would say, for their enterprise customers. Enterprise customers are quite feature sensitive, and they want the latest capabilities. Voicemail, where you have to sort of dial up and press 1 for the next message, is very last century. And everyone's used today to using apps and powerful user interfaces mediated by these apps. And why should voicemail be any different? And so Norwood kind of, at this point in time, from the very best information we can summon, has the most powerful voicemail solution in the market to sort of deliver these kinds of very advanced features. And so our starting point is, you've got an old voicemail platform, please have a look at this and maybe try it internally with a pilot, and you will see that it's delivering a real step change in functionality for the user. Of course, right after that, what then happens is, well, what does this mean economically to me? And I've got a few kind of prototyped mini case study, I call it. I really want to emphasize here, this is not relating to a physical operator. It has been designed with a specific operator in mind, but it's not something that, not a customer of ours at this stage, and I just wanted to use it as a kind of highlight so that you help understand what the economics are and why operators might be motivated to actually consider upgrading their voicemail platform. And you can see here, this is actually a European operator. Got about 17 million customers installed, so it's a reasonably good sized one. And one of the things that better voicemail can do is help them terminate more inbound calls. Now, it turns out when those calls are coming from other networks, this operator can actually charge revenue from the other networks for that. So they have a motivation to have solutions that help their customers route their calls to voicemail and have less what they call slam downs, where the call isn't actually terminated. And a good voicemail solution will sort of encourage that a little bit indirectly, because the users will read the voicemail, call the user back. And over time, what you see is users get trained to leave messages, and the users then respond to them using, hopefully, our brilliant platform. It's a pretty tough world out there, because while the minutes are looking good, the dollars they can charge for the minutes are sort of reducing. And part of that is driven by the fact that the over-the-top players have these much better interfaces and are able to attract users over to that. So it's only really by having a better user experience the operators can sustain the pricing on voice, bundling extra features in, so that it becomes a more of a differentiated service and not a commodity. And by doing that, they can reduce the price erosion that they're seeing in the market currently by a little bit. Now, it turns out if they even achieve a very small amount of reduction in that, it means major dollars for the operator, and it funds easily the deployment of an upgrade to the voicemail system that we might have delivered. And so this is kind of one of the key starting points that we have when we talk to operators. The other thing about better voicemail is that it reduces churn. If you're the only guy in town that's delivering visual voicemail and maybe transcribe visual voicemail, your most valuable customers are less likely to churn away. And again, you can measure what the impact on that is over a number of year period. And it turns out again that this is a really nice piece of business for the operator if they can think of ways of doing churn reduction. This means meaningful millions of dollars going to the bottom line for the operator, and therefore they'll consider potentially investment of hundreds of thousands or low millions of dollars of capex spend with a supplier like us to achieve that. And transcribed visual voicemail finally then provides a basis for a completely new service that they could add on, and they could actually grow revenue with it. It turns out this particular operator, when you model the three, this transcribed premium service really dominates the equation and makes it very attractive for them to consider upgrading their services. As you probably intuitively could understand, new services that are really delivering a leap in functionality usually are easier to charge for. And we see that with, for example, Verizon in the US, not one of our customers, but they give away Visual Voicemail Basic, the core version, and they charge for the premium service, I think $3 US a month. So there's really in summary, hopefully I've provided a little bit of an explanation of A, where we're at on the general operations of the business, B, where we're at on technologies and why we think we have a winning set of technologies that are differentiated and strong in terms of interacting and engaging with clients. And you can see from the macro view that there's really a lot of opportunity out there from just the economics of legacy voicemails being out there that aren't yet upgraded to visual voicemail, and also the opportunity for the premium service really provides a very strong economically compelling motivator for operators to think about deploying those types of services. With that, I think I'll turn it over to questions from Shane.
All right, thanks very much, Paul. Just a reminder to everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, there's a Q&A function within the webinar software, and you can enter a question there, and we'll enter that out, read that out for everyone. So Paul, I've got one question that's coming in from shareholder John, and he would like to ask a question about Norwood's competitors. So he'd like to ask about known competitors in the industry, any competitors developing a similar product in direct competition to Norwood, and on current proposals, are we coming across any competitors?
Yes, so the big elephant in the market is a company called Mavenir. Mavenir have been for the last decade or so mopping up all the other voicemail vendors. So they're sitting there as the major player. Mavenir and a second one called Ribbon Communications are the two that we normally see in the market. Excuse me. There are smaller players. Kirusa in New Zealand, there's a small startup player that's attempting to remain relevant there. But we generally see Mavenir as the big guys and the people that we're probably thinking about most day to day. They market themselves as a full stack 5G core network vendor, so they have all of the software platforms that are necessary to sell into an operator. They're about 4,000 people. They're private equity based. With Spark in particular, they were the incumbent before we contacted them in mid-2018. They were the guys that said to Spark, you need to pay us more because our platform has gone end of life and you need to buy our next one. And Spark at that point chose to go out to tender. We ended up in partnership with another party winning a competitive tender against Mavenir for that service. And I've met a couple of the directors of Mavenir previously who were very curious as to how we did that. But really at the end of the day, I think what we did was we won their hearts and minds. One of the strengths of our platform, because we still run our own hosted solution, is we can give anybody who wants to really an immediate low-cost pilot of the solution so they can start experiencing it. And with Spark, we had a very large number of, I won't say exactly how many, but we had a very large number of their staff using the service before they even decided to go to tender. And we kind of won their hearts and minds at that point. So that's a key part of our strategy, is to get these pilots going and working inside the operator so that they can get used to the service and understand that it is delivering that lift in functionality that I was talking about.
Thanks, Paul. We've received actually 2 separate questions now on pilots. Are there pilots underway? And another question is, how many pilots currently underway? I'm not sure if you're going to go into numbers, but yeah, do we have any pilots underway?
I don't want to talk about how many, but we have pilots progressing internationally and also domestically. And it's not sort of one of each. So we have some good engagement, and part of that's born out of the ongoing prospecting. We've got an internal target to try and touch all of the main mobile operators this year. We're making slow progress against that and trying to find the right people, but we are progressing. And as we do, then depending on where they are in their life cycle for their platform, they may or may not be receptive to the idea of thinking about upgrading their platform. And when they are receptive, pretty much almost immediately, we kind of transition into a pilot discussion. And then it's a case of working out whether their infrastructure needs any modification at all to run the pilot or not. So we run our standard world voicemail apps in 5 countries currently, which is Australia, actually 4 countries, no, 5, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, and the US. So they're all the English-speaking countries, but we can on demand deliver kind of private copies of the apps to any operator in the world, anywhere, but it does require a little bit of working in partnership with them to get the things like call diversions and things supported so that they can actually test the full workflow of the solution.
Yeah. Well, that probably leads into another question we've received, which is, has any telco ever informed Norwood that they will not be using your platform, or pilot hasn't progressed?
Yeah, we have the odd pilots where they kind of just they run out of momentum, but not because of any lack of or happiness with our platform. They end up getting consumed by COVID. Was a good example. It's a Southeast Asian operator that's in that situation, and they've just sort of gone, it's getting too hard, we have to stop, and we'll come back and revisit it once things have normalised. We have a number of discussions with a whole range of different parties, and some of them are not operators, some of them are major telco vendors who are interested in potentially on-selling our service. And none of those have gone away. We just realised that it's been, over the last couple of months in particular, an extremely slow and also to some degree turbulent time, because operators have had to kind of rejig everything. I'll give you a good example. The Canadian operator I had a call with last Tuesday, we first spoke with them 3 months ago, and then kind of everything broke on COVID and they just had to stop. And they went a little bit like some of our existing clients into health and safety messaging for their customers, and just laser focused on doing that to try and support good communications to people locally. And you've just got to, I think, navigate around those things. But we haven't lost the head-to-head tender. We haven't been in a situation where we're known to be bidding competitively against somebody else and lost it due to features or functionality or anything. So where we've managed to get that engagement up to the point where the operator is willing to commit, we end up winning, which is really nice. We have a couple of a number of these pilots ongoing at this moment, even in spite of COVID. And one of the things we have to be aware of, Australia and New Zealand are in really privileged positions at the moment as far as COVID is concerned, but the rest of the world is still kind of, as you're probably seeing in the news, semi-chaotic, and there's a bunch of different things that serve to distract people from trying to focus on this sort of stuff. But nevertheless, in a number of countries internationally, we're having really productive discussions, and we've got a couple of very interesting discussions ongoing here in Australia itself.
All right, thanks, Paul. Obviously, there's never any guarantees in the sales process, but that sounds not promising.
No, well, I think, again, one way for us to sort of make sure we're progressing and moving forward and growing is to have a number of these discussions in parallel, and that's sort of what we're laser focused on.
Yeah. We've got quite a detailed question from shareholder Roxy in regards to the Spark deal and associated apps provided by Norwood. They're asking how many downloads have occurred across iOS and Android, how many downloads have converted to subscriptions, what's the average spend of each subscription, how many monthly active users are there on the platform from March to May, and any other statistics the company would be happy to share in regards to uptake of the app.
Yeah, I think the only thing I can tell you there is there is data on the app stores that give you some bead on downloads and also what is charged on the subscriptions, but everything else is kind of commercial in confidence, and it's difficult for us to go kind of into individual detail. It's also commercially sensitive for Spark, and we want to respect that as well. We're very pleased with how it's progressing. I mean, just to give you an idea, total receipts from customers generally for the first 9 months of 2020 is 495,000 versus 325 in the corresponding prior period, which is about 51% increase. And that sort of demonstrates our progress. And we, you know, I think we very, very happy, and I think I used the words, you know, all our deals are progressing and contracts are progressing satisfactorily. Well, we're very happy about how they're all progressing at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I have another question from shareholder Lisa. It's asking about an ETA of pilot completion dates where users have expressed a high level of satisfaction of full or partial suite of services, and any indications that contracts are likely to ensue.
Look, it's difficult for us to say because in our experience, we've found telcos not to be the quickest people to deal with. They have a lot of processes that they've got to go through, a lot of internal buy-in and socialization of things. But and we've seen a lot of variability in terms of how quickly operators can move. Part of that depends on their internal processes. If an operator has adopted an agile process workflow internally and really lives and breathes that, you know, then we've seen relatively quick action. If not, they can kind of sit there and, you know, go for long times. What's interesting to us is when we see operators move and start mobilizing towards an RFI or an RFP, because that then provides certainty to us that there's closure imminent. And then typically before then, there's a kind of quiet period where we're not allowed to talk to them and touch them. We're in a number at the moment of these pre-RFI/RFP discussions where we're seeking to influence the spec, and hopefully, you know, as they release and announce those RFIs and RFPs, we'll have influenced them to a sufficient extent that a lot of the things they're looking for are some of the features that we deliver.
So we've got another question from shareholder Mark. Hi, Paul. Is Norwood focusing on large business or corporate executives who are constantly on their mobiles for all aspects of business? This would appear to be a real market.
Yes, that's a great suggestion. We're not focusing on them individually. We just don't have the resources to go and do kind of B to high-end C sales. I think it'd be tricky. But where we do see that biting is with our telco partners and existing customers. They're very focused on servicing business customers up front. We've got you know, some of the pilots we're running internally are with business customers in Australia. I can disclose that much, which are attached to a certain telco. We're pretty excited to sort of see that there's cohort of users being churned over from another operator. And this new telco is basically winning that on the basis of also being able to supply potentially Norwood solutions. So, you know, each deal is different, but yeah, the business users definitely are kind of a highly attractive end user candidate for this kind of service.
Thanks. I've got a question from shareholder Mark. With the interest in World Voicemail, is there other interest shown in World Phone and other apps?
There is, but we're trying to remain laser focused on voicemail at the moment because we see that that's actually working for us from a sales operations point of view with the telcos. One of the things that we are in 2 discussions on at the moment are to enable what's called a second line offering. So the hosted platform that I showed earlier in the presentation, that's not just there for voicemail. It can run other process instances and scale and orchestrate them in the same way that delivers this great reliability. And one of those is being able to offer a kind of second line approach for customers. That would require WorldPhone or possibly a slightly modified version of that to make it work in the way that the telcos are looking for. But we're mainly focusing on the voicemail opportunity, and that's really just a reflection of where we are with limited sales resource and making sure that we're not spreading ourselves too thin across the market.
All right. Had another question come in earlier via email. With trade tensions involving telecommunication providers, will these tensions be beneficial to Norwood if they proceed? I think this is probably a reference to Hawaii and similar sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's probably we're not big enough, and we're sort of like the small mammals that are running around the legs of the dinosaurs. One way to think of life. But market structure. There's three large, what they call tier one operators, which are Huawei, Ericsson, and Nokia. And some of you may be aware that Huawei raises concerns with certain jurisdictions about security and being Chinese operated and owned. None of those three, by the way, offer voicemail services. These are generally delivered by the likes of Mavenir and Ribbon, who are sitting in that tier 2 layer. And Nord would probably be tier 3, I guess. But the tier 2 guys, I don't think any of them, they're probably the ones that are poised most to sort of eat into a little bit of the discomfort that Huawei would be feeling, and certainly also Ericsson and Nokia. The trouble for telco operators is that they hate the idea of only having two large tier 1 providers. The industry is too concentrated. Nick Reed, who's the group CEO of Vodafone globally a year ago, said we've got to fix this and actually encourage a diversification of our supplier base, which again indirectly would help Norwood and open up some discussions with some of these telcos.
Thanks, Paul. Just a reminder to anybody, if you want to ask a question, you can put it in through the Q&A panel in the software. I'll just dip back into some of the earlier ones. Is shareholder dilution a concern for the company at the moment?
No, I mean, again, I've tried to obliquely refer to this as we're seeing the situation for us looking better over the coming quarter and allowing us to potentially provide some guidance. The oblique reference to that is obviously we're seeing things on the up for us, and I do not believe in the sort of medium term that we need to worry about excessive dilution and things like that. We're certainly, I think, seeing, as you've seen in the last quarterly, we're seeing a steady improvement in our numbers. And hopefully next quarter sometime I can comment further on how that improvement sort of might manifest itself.
Okay, and just a reminder, everybody, if you've got any questions, send them in through the Q&A. Paul, another question received via email: why should investors invest in Norwood?
Well, so when you're looking at the market, there is just a massive opportunity of all these legacy systems that are sitting out there that haven't been looked after and had due attention paid to them. They've been sitting there withering on the vine. We see, 85% of all operators running platforms that don't have even visual voicemail, and we see just a huge opportunity to go out and allow those operators to refresh. We did some very interesting modeling with one partner, and I'll mention this just in the abstract. I'm not providing a forecast, but just in the abstract. If you are able to persuade 20% of those legacy voicemail companies to upgrade to use a new visual voicemail service of the kind that I've spoken about today, which is just the basic one, not the transcribed one, that turns into a $100 million business per annum over 5 years. So even that basic core service has potential from a addressable market point of view I'm talking about here, really to be quite a valuable target for us to go after. And the people that will win in that market are the ones that have an unequivocal cost advantage. You will not persuade customers to sort of, if they haven't upgraded yet, you really won't shake them loose of the tree unless you can provide something effectively for nothing. And so our approach for that is we're selling them our core platform at the same price as their current maintenance cost. It's actually how Huawei won all their market share. They went into operators and said that bad old sort of class 5 switch you had, we'll give you a shiny new next generation one for the same price as your existing maintenance price. So for a while we were calling it the Huawei strategy, but someone told me that wasn't a good idea. So we're not, but we do see tremendous addressable market potential for it. And I think we're steadily putting the pieces in place that demonstrate that we're a credible force to be reckoned with telcos. To give you an idea, one of the platforms we're installing right now is an on-premises solution, and it is, of a level of complexity that's really pretty impressive, and it gives us great credibility with both telco vendor partners and also other telcos that we're able to execute on that kind of complexity given the size that we are.
Thanks, Paul. I have a question sent in from shareholder John. This is about competitors again. In trying to gauge Norwood's product positioning in the market, how does it differentiate to its competitors? Are there features Norwood provides which no one else does? And keeping in mind the long sales cycle, my concern would be over time competition may build up. Do you have any concerns there?
Yes, it's a great question. Firstly, just to pick off the differentiation aspect, we have continually invested in this service and platform, so that we've now built what I call a fairly robust feature moat around the proposition. Strategists who are advising big companies on corporate strategy would call this an isolating mechanism. It prevents people coming in and chipping away at your business because these things frankly take quite a long time to build and develop. And so we've built over the last couple of years a fairly formidable platform that has not just sort of raw effort put into it, but also a lot of love. That sounds like a strange thing to say, but we've built really beautiful user experiences that when people use our service, it just shows that we've cared about the end user experience. And there's a truism when you're selling SaaS services that it's all about the quality of the end user experience that you deliver. And so we've put an enormous amount of effort into that. And I think, if you compare kind of PCs versus Macs, in the old days, Steve Jobs would sort of give Bill Gates a hard time and say, the trouble with Microsoft is they have no class. It's a little bit the same in telco land. And it's specifically with telco land, and when you study the nature of people selling services in telcos, those tier 2 operators, very, very few, if any of them, are delivering high quality end user experiences. So one of the things that differentiates us is not only have we got an extremely credible core network platform that is absolutely persuasively great and is able to take these workloads off telcos, but secondly, we're if not the only one that really delivers a very thoughtful user experience at the level that the telcos can then integrate into their network. That's not to be confused with general app vendors and app developers, because there's obviously a lot of great using apps and things like that, but it's the marriage of our core network platform and also then being able to render that in a really effective way to the end users that's really compelling to customers. And so, some of the things, just again, going back to differentiation, things like spam filtering, emergency filtering, being able to provide really advanced voicemail management services like grouping and other things inside the platform. Those are valuable things that customers, I think, value. We get great feedback on. People love using it. The second thing is that's a point in history where we are right now with those things. We're obviously still not stopping in terms of development, and we've got some pretty exciting things which I don't want to talk about right now in our product pipeline that sort of take the idea of voicemail and really take it up to another level. So voicemail today, yes, but with AI and other things, you can really make that a much more what's the word, maybe sexy proposition for the end customers. And so we're working on a bunch of things like that. We're certainly not short of ideas on how to maintain that competitive edge. We've got a lot of cool things that we're working on currently.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I have a question from shareholder Maddie. It's with respect to the options NOROA. Are we expecting these to be exercised come October? And just before you answer that, I'll just remind everybody that those options have an exercise price of 8 cents from memory.
Yes, so there's obviously a gap between our current share price and the 8 cents. Clearly, for them to become exercisable, our share price will need to rise. I encourage you all to assist in that endeavour. But that was a joke. But I think all I can say is we're working furiously on doing things that will deliver evidence to the market that the share price should be well north of 8 cents. And we have a bunch of things that we're working on there, and we're feeling good about where we are in relation to those.
Thanks, Paul. We have a question from shareholder Lisa. Has Norwood approached the Federal Minister for Communications and Cyber Safety, Mr. Paul Fletcher?
No, we have not, but we'd love an introduction. We're mainly focusing on targeting, telcos, and so we talk less to governments and more to the classic titles are Vice President of Value-Added Services inside telcos, to give you an idea, because that's usually the piece of the business that owns the part of the telco that would care about upgrading this functionality.
Thanks, Paul. And we're approaching toward the end of the webinar now, so if anyone does have any questions they'd like, if they could get them in. Can you see yourself putting together World Phone and most apps as a single package to telcos and end users in the app shop?
The answer to that is we are exploring a couple of ways of merging some of the functionality together, specifically again for the second line concept. And so we are looking at that. It's not like we're letting all those technologies kind of sit on the vine and wither and die. We think they have value. We're very proud of what we've put together for those. Again, just because of our limited resources, we tend to focus more on voicemail and kind of doing more of that. But as we get into those operators and start building relationships with them, it actually becomes a really interesting thing to discuss as a kind of upsell. And one of the particularly interesting areas is the idea of marrying these types of services with eSIMs. And maybe it's not the app, but the cloud piece that sits behind the app that made the app work in the first place, and have that drive an eSIM, because that for us is an extremely interesting particular area at the moment.
Well, I think it's pretty fair to say, though, at the moment, certainly for the next quarter, the laser focus is on work voicemail direct to the telco.
Yes, and where voicemail might go beyond that. So we've got these dual thrust at this stage, but 80% of the company is extremely focused on delivering its current contractual commitments, which are going great, and B, working on getting new contractual commitments that can hopefully support the share price.
This is a question from shareholder Mark. When is it likely to receive feedback to the market about potential uptake of world voicemail to domestic telcos, and how are those pilots progressing? It might be a bit of a how long's a piece of string question.
Yeah, look, it's a tricky one to answer. We're aware that there's an operator locally that may move to RFP in the coming quarter or so. Again, that's up to them, not us. So we have to kind of be driven by their timeframes. But we can see that that's a really interesting window for us to jump through. We've been working on that operator for a long time, so we know everybody from the CTO down, and we see a number of opportunities in Australia with telcos, not just one actually. And then even with some telcos, it's parallel opportunities for certain different aspects running in parallel. So there may be multiple RFPs coming out for various types of functions in due course. And so we, these things are relationship sells. They have to learn to trust us. They have to learn to trust the technology. They have to learn to trust the team. We engage with them. We spend a lot of time with them to the greatest extent that we can. And by doing that, we hopefully become a known quantity by the time they actually pull the trigger on the RFP and move forward.
Okay. Well, Paul, we're just about approaching the end of time now, so I might, and there's no more sort of questions in the queue here, so I might just hand it over to you to provide any final closing comments.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Shane. So we're really tremendously happy with where we are currently. It's been a very tough couple of months, and we feel like we've traversed a really tough period for the company. We are very excited about what we can see lying ahead of us for the coming months. And again, as we see some of those opportunities crystallize and firm up, we hope to be back in the mode of being able to give you more explicit details about that. At the moment, we're just heads down, working very hard on existing and near-term future opportunities and making them come good.
All right, thanks very much, Paul, and thank you to everyone who's joined today and for all the questions. And that will conclude the webinar for today.
Thanks everybody for the questions.